Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Sonika Garcia,
And I'm Brad Davidson, and this is Breaking the Code.
a podcast series focused on debunking the myths about the discipline of behavioral science and arming our listeners with the information they need to make sense of behavioral science and to help them apply it to their work as marketers.
So today we're going to talk about something that is near and dear to Sunika's heart in behavioral science, which is nudges. And so there's a lot talked about nudges, especially in our discipline, in our field where we work in medical communications. You nudge people to do things you want them to do. You nudge people to change behavior all the time. And there's just so much nudging around that we figured we'd just talk about it. So Sunika, let's just start at the very beginning, which is a very fine place to start, as they say. What is a nudge in behavioral science?
Yeah, thanks, Brad. So I'm laughing at nudges being near and dear to my heart. I think they're an important topic if we're thinking about, these buzzwords within behavioral science, like heuristics, which we talked about in a previous episode. It has gained momentum, but it's not a new concept. So not to give a nudge history lesson by any means, but the concept of the nudge theory was introduced almost 80 years ago at this point. But like many topics, sort of gained momentum after the book Nudge came out. I think it came out in like 2008. And so that book was written by two economists, well, a lawyer and an economist, and neither one of them are, just behavioral scientists. But I think it's interesting because a lot of the work within behavioral science kind of goes back to like, an economical approach or behavioral economics, if you will. So, with that being said, to answer your question, Brad, a nudge or, nudge theory, it's really this concept that, as simply put, it shapes someone's environment, the decision making environment, to make one decision over another. So, it's actual, tangible ways to change the environment in which someone is thinking about choosing A or choosing B. And a more fancy term for that is like choice architecture, right? So it's like the architecture of choice that is being changed.
First thing that I learned when I first heard of nudges
Mhm.
was that it's not necessarily like a physical poke, right? I think one misunderstanding is a nudge is an alert on your phone or something like that. But when you talk about modifying choice architecture, can you give me an example of that, or the environment of choice architecture, or all of those terms that you can read the minute you Google up nudge theory?
Yeah, and totally did that. But I-
No, it's fine. I'm just those are the terms people use. I'm just saying, like, what do you
yeah,
mean by choice architecture? What is a nudge within choice architecture?
right. So, I mean, there's obviously a lot of examples, and we don't even realize we're being nudged and poked around all day long, and like we don't even realize it. But an example that I like, that I actually think that this nudge has had, there are studies that show that it's been effective. We think about this whole push to like eating better and combating the obesity epidemic that is facing our country. So a lot of restaurants, and I'm sure people, our listeners have seen it, they started putting the calorie count on in menus. And what that did is, I mean, yes, it annoyed some people. Definitely annoyed me at first. I was like, oh, I don't want to know this. But if you're going out to dinner and you are trying to make healthier choices, the menu is really that environment that you're making a decision. When you're looking at the menu, that is the decision-making environment for you in that moment to make a healthier choice. And so what that did by showing the calorie count was nudging someone towards maybe choosing an option that's a little healthier, because you're staring at a number that's, a quantifiable, tangible thing that you're looking at. And to make a healthier option, it sure, if you went into that restaurant thinking like, I'm going to get a cheeseburger and fries, you might still get it. I'm not going to sit here and say that every single time you're going to choose the salad. It's not necessarily about those two extremes, but rather if you see the calorie count on the cheeseburger and next to it you see a sandwich that has a lower calorie count, you might be nudged to make that healthier choice. And I'm using air quotes for healthier. I mean, no one can see me do that, but I am, because I think we know that calories doesn't always show health. Sometimes there are
Right.
empty calories, but it's with the idea that in this case, you're making a choice that you're putting less into your body. And so, like, yes, calories in versus calories out, you are going to lose weight. So specifically just for weight loss, that was a nudge that actually was impactful.
So beyond just like text alerts, take your pills, nudges here are sort of perceptual signs, signals, something in the environment that sort of drive you in one direction or another, almost like the bumpers on the gutters in bowling ball for kids. Like they kind of steer you in a direction. So is removing prices from a menu a nudge or a reverse nudge, right? Because like that's the other thing is like when you go to a restaurant and there's no prices, my heart skips a beat usually, to be honest. I'm like, uh-oh, this is going to be bad.
That's interesting. Yeah, I wonder. So for that, and I actually never thought about that, but I also hate when restaurants do that because I'm like, all right, well, I mean, now you're nudging me to maybe pick the most authentic choice that I would ever pick because, price isn't an option, but like that's not the case because price isn't a
At some
concern.
point, price
I
is going
mean,
to show up.
it's going
Yeah.
to show up. You're not giving me a free meal. So I don't necessarily know that that's a very successful nudge or maybe what even the intention behind that is. I don't know. But yeah, that's interesting.
Well, I'm
Yes.
certain the intention is to keep you from avoiding the most expensive thing on the menu. So
Ye-
in some sense, I guess it is a nudge. I always think of nudging as a proactive thing, right? Like there's a positive sort of result you're looking for. And I guess in that case, the restaurant could look at it and go, the day we took the prices off the menu was the day people started ordering the tomahawk steak or whatever. That's a
Right. Okay. So after this book came out on nudges, nudge theory, everyone was super hype about like, let's apply nudges. And then more recently, a study came out that basically said that like the nudge theory is BS and suffers from publication bias. We only hear of the examples where nudges were that they actually worked, and we're not hearing about all the times that they didn't.
right.
So how much is that? So, okay, so that's the one piece of it. And then the other piece to like the point of this restaurant example is a nudge supposed to be beneficial for like a business to make money? Or are we supposed to be are we supposed to be using nudges for like the better good, fighting obesity, promoting hygiene with washing hands? Like where is, where do nudges like I guess cross the line between being like ethical and not ethical is also a concern.
That's something you read about the minute you start looking at nudges. There's a lot of, the second line down on a lot of these is it's not terribly ethical to influence people's decision making unconsciously on their behalf. Are
Yes.
nudges ethical? Is like a big question.
Right. And what I will say, and I don't, again, I think that it's kind of like the answer to that is, well, it depends. And the it depends there is, okay, so in order to use a nudge, I mean, yes, in the definition, even people make it very clear that this is supposed to be nudging someone towards a behavior that ultimately is going to be for their benefit, not like a gray line. Is this beneficial? Is it not? But like something that is black and white, it's to their benefit. However, I do think that a big piece of the ethical nature of is it ethical or not is the way that a choice is presented. So remember, this is changing the environment of choice, but it's not taking the idea of choice away or the opportunity for choice away. You still have a choice. If it's the idea about like, you put the salads in the front of the cafeteria and the pizza and the hamburgers in the
Right.
back, that whole thing, you're not removing the pizza and the hamburgers. They're still there. The choice is still present. You're just kind of structuring the environment in
Right.
a way to nudge someone to choose a salad. So that to me is a big piece of is if it's ethical or not. It's the choice component.
Yeah, and I know I'm the one who sort of asked the question, but I'll sort of answer it as well from my perspective, which is it's a really good question, and I don't think we have a really good answer to it. And I'm not so sure we spend a lot of time thinking about that in advertising, but I'm not so sure nudges are any different from advertising in general. There is no neutral way of presenting information, no matter how you present it. You've presented it in one way, and there's an infinite number of other ways you could have presented it to a different effect. And so I think the question, are nudges ethical, could just be laddered up to, is advertising ethical? Is communication in general ethical? The intended effect of advertising is to change behavior. That's not hidden. That's right up front. The
Hmm.
intended effect of how people design traffic flow in things like casinos or Target. those are designed to change behavior. And those also get, categorized as nudges these days, which I guess for me, one of the things that I always question is everything a nudge? The term, to your point, has suffered from publication fatigue, but also overexposure fatigue. Not everything's a nudge to me. Like I think foot traffic design is absolutely proven to change behavior, purchasing behavior, time in store, that sort of stuff. I don't know if they're nudges necessarily in my mind. But again, I'm not a nudge expert. But as an
Yeah.
exploratory discussion, are they nudges? I mean, you tell me.
Yeah, yeah, they are. I mean, one a really popular example of a nudge is when in like, and I don't know if it's like the subway, but like, in like monorails and like any sort of like, the light rail, those kind of train things. They have like a yellow arrows on the floor, like red arrows to really show you where to stand, like away from the door. And the
Right,
point is, it's not just like to inform you not to stand here, but when you make it so bright and obvious, someone who then is standing on it calls attention. Like it makes you feel like, okay, well, this is like very obvious and I don't want to be that person. So there's like
right,
that social proof kind of going on too. Like I don't want to so blatantly just disregard this thing. So even the way, so yes, having it there at all is a nudge, but then the way that it's presented is improving on that nudge and building on it. And that's where I think we maybe need to have this conversation on like, okay, well, we're healthcare marketers. How do we know? Like, okay, we need to change a behavior. How do we know if like the nudge theory is right? Or like, oh, it sounds interesting. Like, how do I actually know if I should
right,
apply it? And just taking it back there. So I think really quick, just to kind of level set, two questions that I would ask if you're wondering, is the concept of nudges going to be something that you should use as a behavior change technique for your brand or, whatever it is. One, like anything, you need to ask yourself the question of like, what is the behavior change? Like, what is the clear they're here and they need to be there?
right,
The next piece of it is what are the choices that they are presented to make to then like lend itself to that behavior. And I say that and it's not obvious. There has to be an opportunity for choice. So, for example, this is just the example that comes to my head right now, but like, if you're trying to nudge someone to go to the gym straight from work every day at 5 p.m. before you even go home, go to the gym so you live a healthier life. Okay. But someone who has to, at 5 p.m., rush to pick up their kid from daycare or school or whatever, they're not presented with that choice. For them, it's not go to the gym or go home. It's I actually don't have that choice available to me in that moment. So no matter what nudge intervention you throw at me, it's not going to work because my opportunity for choice based on things like, my lifestyle, my prioritization, whatever it may be, it's not there. And that's where it
right.
goes back. We need to understand our consumers and our target audience to understand like what is there a choice opportunity and like is there even one in this moment? So
Right. And that
yeah.
I completely agree. And that gets to this idea that I sort of started this whole, we pick topics and stuff. And I said to me, nudging is nag adjacent, right? Like
Yep.
nudging is 1 inch away from nagging. But there's choices involved in nagging, right? And somebody once pointed out to me that nagging is about power, that if you ask somebody to do something and they don't do it, you have to ask them again, you have become a nag, but it's because they didn't do it. And so like I think one of the things about nudges is we don't control what somebody chooses to do, but we can start trying to steer them. And I think that's where people start getting very uncomfortable ethically, going like, steer them where? But for example, in our world, nudges for adherence aren't a terrible thing, especially if somebody signs up for them, because now these are like pokes, right? These are like reminders that you ask for. But those are nudges to get you to do things you wanted to do you might have forgotten. Birth control adherence is something that people talk about a lot. Nobody wants to forget their birth control,
Yeah.
at least that I'm aware of, unless you're, planning on sneakily getting pregnant or something. But basically, people don't want to skip their birth control. And so being reminded is not unwelcome. Being reminded that you're supposed to go to the gym when you can't is probably counterproductive. It's probably frustrating.
You actually brought up something that I meant to say. It's an important piece. You have to there has to be a motivation to engage in that desired behavior. Like
Right.
that point blank, even with the calories on the menu, this is not going to work for someone who's not actually trying to like lose weight or live a healthier life. If that's not on your radar and you're like when you think about like stages of change, if you're not even in like the contemplation phase of it and it's not in your mind at all, this nudge isn't going to work. So like at the very least when we think about the work that we do, whether it be medication adherence or on the HCP side,
Right.
prescribing patterns, the desire to actually do this behavior is there. Patients want to take their medication. They want to be adherent.
That's a topic for they do and they
Yeah.
don't. That's a topic for another day, but
Well,
you're right, you
the
know.
intention is there, right? Like you pick up your medication. Yeah, maybe you're not happy about the fact that you have to take it, but you do know that taking it is what you need to do for whatever condition you have. So if you had no desire to ever even take the medication in the first place, most likely than not, you're like at a different point in the patient journey. Like
Yeah,
we're
well,
talking
you know what?
about,
We'll save that for another day because, as we know, a third of first prescriptions are never even picked up, right? So 30% of scripts never get filled. And that
right,
in and of itself is very interesting. But
100%. Yes. But
but
the
I think that gets us past
70% that
nudge.
are
Yeah.
picked up. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I think there's a lot here, you know. I think to your point, like nudges work when you want them. Nudges can work when you're not aware of choice. So I think people didn't know for a long time that you could opt out of union dues, for example. Those are considered nudges, right? Do you automatically enroll people in unions or do they have to enroll themselves in unions? Do you automatically enroll people in 401k saving or do they have to do it for themselves? Those are considered nudges too sometimes. And I think they're different. I think structurally taking choice out of people's hands and making them undo things actively goes beyond nudge, but I might just be focusing on what I think the word means as opposed to what the theory talks about. I'll leave it there. I think the thing about nudges that everybody, first of all, we both agree they're kind of overexposed. We both agree they're applied so widely these days that I'm not so sure it's a super meaningful term. But at the core of it, there's this idea that we can help people who want to change or who want to be supported in this way. We can actually create big air quotes here from me, right? Choice architecture environments within which the quote right choice, I'm just air quotes all over there, but the right choice is the easier one. And I think that's something that we've got to do a better job about. We have to do a better job of making it easy for people to make choices that they want to make for themselves, even if we can talk about what do people really want till the cows come home. But I think, it is healthier for people to walk home instead of take the bus and stuff like that. If we can encourage those things through choice architecture changes in the environment, then that's a good thing, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think just one last thing to add, again, from like actually applying this in the work that we do. If you're, listening and you're like, well, I do have this behavior that, needs to be changed, and I think nudge theory could work. Uh, Not to sound like a broken record, but it always helps when physical and psychological barriers are like really unearthed and outlined, because I think oftentimes nudges, people think, oh, that falls into the category of just, the physical alleviating or addressing like the physical barrier. And like nudges are looked at as like very like tangible tactic, but where successful nudge really is set apart is in, how well does that nudge, whether that be through the messaging, the copy, the cadence, does it address psychological barriers?
So nudge
Yeah.
motivation,
Yeah.
right?
Yep, exactly. So little things like tweaking certain language within a nudge to address a certain bias or mindset or belief. That's really what takes a nudge from point A to being successful in changing behavior. And we can definitely, in another episode, because I do think it's needed, there's a lot to talk about, provide some examples of brands that have done that really well. Or
Well, I think that would be really interesting. So thank you. As always, I learned a lot today
thank
about
you.
nudges. I hope people did. And I'm Brad Davidson.
And I'm Sonika Garcia. Thanks for
And
listening.
yeah, thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.